from one of the deal's chief opponents. Ron Dermer is Israel's ambassador to the United States. Prior to being named to that post, he was a senior advisor, some would say the senior advisor, to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Welcome, Ron.
Good to be with you, Fred.
So, what the Iranians say is that if the deal falls through, they will resume their nuclear program. What the Europeans say now publicly, the British ambassador says, if the deal is rejected, the sanctions will unravel. Why is that a good scenario for Israel's security?
Well, it's also, I just don't think it's true, Fareed. One of those two things cannot happen. If Iran goes ahead with its nuclear program, let's think about what actually happens in the real world. If Iran decides to continue its program, which it was doing in October 2013, before the interim agreement was signed, then it will not come into compliance with this agreement. There will be no implementation date.
But they have nobody has signed this agreement, so how could they? Why would they need to be in compliance?
No, I'm just saying they won't. But in the real world, if Iran decides to go ahead with its nuclear program, there will be no implementation date, which means the UN Security Council sanctions will stay. It means all the U.S. sanctions will stay. It's hard for me to see European companies that will decide to do business with Iran after this is voted down by Congress, to do business with a $400 billion Iranian economy, and turn themselves away from a $17 trillion U.S. economy. So it might be that Iran will continue its program. We don't believe that they will break out. They'll go underneath the red line that they perceive that the international community will act against them. But you will not have a situation where Iran does not comply with its agreement and the sanctions regime unravels. That just can't happen. There's no logic to that approach.
But that is what the Europeans and the Russians are already trying to sell them. But let me ask you,
how does that happen in the real world? I just don't get it. If the UN Security Council sanctions stay, the U.S. sanctions stay.
Well, as you know, sanctions are very leaky. Countries don't always abide by them de facto, even if they pretend to abide by them de jure. But let me ask you about these timelines. For 20 years, Prime Minister Netanyahu said that Iran is 2 to 3 years away from a bomb. Now, nobody I know in Mossad, in the U.S. intelligence, believes that counterintelligence efforts have done more than delay Iran by a year or two. So, why has he been wrong for 20 years about Iran? Is it possible that you don't completely understand Iran?
Well, look, I think that the Prime Minister of Israel understands Iran better than almost any leader in the world because he's been focusing on this issue for 20 years.
Now, but he's been predicting that in 2 years they're going to get the bomb 20 years ago.
Get the facts, look at exactly what he said. I've been with the Prime Minister for 15 years, so I know exactly what he said over those 15 years. I can't account for the 5 years before. The Prime Minister has said that they were a certain period, it could be 2 years, it could be 4 years away from getting a bomb. And I guarantee you, Fareed, had the United States and Israel done nothing, over the last 15 years, they would have had a bomb maybe 10 years ago. But Iran, the United States and Israel have worked together to prevent Iran from becoming a nuclear power, and we should continue to work together to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapons capability. This deal closes the nuclear file, not by blocking Iran's path to the bomb, but by ceding to them a nuclear weapons capability and a nuclear arsenal, at best delaying it for a few years.
The leader of the opposition in Israel says the biggest problem with the strategy you're pursuing is that you are alienating the Obama administration, alienating Washington. Isn't it true that no matter what happens, for Israel's security, a close relationship with Washington is essential? You're taking a position that is at odds with the Obama administration, at odds with Hillary Clinton. Do you worry about that?
First of all, the Prime Minister of Israel and the head of the coalition agree that this is a very bad deal that endangers Israel's security. As to your question about the U.S.-Israel relationship, there's no question that this is the most important relationship in the world. And we are not eager in any way to have to be at odds on the most important foreign policy priority of the President of the United States. That's a big deal. But guess what else is a big deal? The survival of the State of Israel is a big deal. And we believe that this deal threatens the survival of Israel. So even with our best of friends, we are making our case. We've made it to President Obama. We've made it for a long time. And now we are making it to all those senators and congressmen who will ultimately decide the fate of this deal in Congress. And we are telling them that this is a bad deal that endangers Israel's security. I want to be clear about something. When the President of the United States and Secretary of State, John Kerry, when they say they believe this deal is better for America and better for Israel, I have no doubt that they're being sincere. We just disagree with their judgment. We think this deal will endanger Israel's security. And in Israel, this view is shared by the Prime Minister, by the head of the opposition, by 30 out of 33 members of our Foreign Affairs Defense Committee. Moses didn't have those kind of numbers. And the people of Israel...
So there are, the former head of Mossad, for example, disagrees.
We're a Jewish state. There are a lot of opinions, and we are a democracy. We are not unanimous on anything. But the overwhelming majority of the Israeli people, all the security establishment that actually is responsible for the security of the country, and the political leadership of the country, both coalition and opposition, believe this is a bad deal. And guess what? You know this to be true. Our concerns are shared by our Arab neighbors. They may express it publicly in a different way, but they see this deal the same way we do.
Let me ask you about American troops. There was a group, I think 29 former generals and admirals signed a letter supporting the deal. I was struck by one of them, the retired Admiral Harold Robinson, who is a rabbi. And he said, as a lifelong Zionist devoted to Israel, he supports this deal. My question to you is it possible in your view to be deeply pro-Israel and strongly in favor of this deal?
Sure, of course. And, and it's possible to be deeply pro-American and be very opposed to this deal. And I think it's important, just as I say, to not question the sincerity of motives of those people who support this deal, to not question the sincerity of motives of those people who oppose it. And from what I've seen, about 2 in 3 Americans of the American people oppose this deal because they know that Iran has been in war with America for 36 years and declares that it's going to continue its war against America. They've held Americans hostage. They've blown up Marines and barracks in Beirut in the 80s. In the 1990s, they were bombing embassies in Africa, and they're responsible for the murder and maiming of thousands of American soldiers in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there's good reason why a lot of Americans, most Americans, are opposed to this deal.
Pleasure to have you on, Ron.